Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is a social psychologist, entrepreneur, author, and skydiver all the way from Kansas City in the United States. His name is Dr. Kevin J. Payne. Welcome to the show, Kevin. How are you doing?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Christian. I appreciate being here.
Oh, the pleasure's mine as always. There's many different, I suppose, directions I can take this in straight away. But let's start from the academic perspective. So you have a PhD in sociology and psychology. I'm just quite interested to know, how did you get into this field of study and what have been your sort of biggest discoveries to date?
Well, in the first place, I always knew I wanted to be a scientist. I was a weird kid from the time I was a kid. I was really interested in science and mathematics, but I was also really interested in the arts. So I grew up both performing and being a science geek. And so that was kind of a weird combination that you don't see as often as you might think. But it is, however, more common than you would think too, because creativity is at the heart of both of those things. If you want to be a scientist, it's about trying to push the edge of knowledge in your particular area. And so I thought I would be a natural scientist. And then long about the time I went to college, I realized that I was so fascinated by people, because people are just the endless conundrum that keeps on coming. And so I made a switch from physics to initially economics, which is actually a fairly common switch because both of those fields emphasize mathematical formulations and that sort of thing. So I did my undergraduate in what the Brits call procedures and policy.
Yep.
And I spent a couple of years there. I was in Oxford and had a great time. So that's political science, economics, philosophy, and in my case, a lot of mathematics and econometrics. So I then went from that to the first year of my PhD in economics, and I got into that. And I don't know if you want the story about this, but it was kind of funny. We're in a weed out class. It's a microeconomics class. And the idea is to start the class with a whole bunch of people in it and get rid of as many as you possibly can throughout the course. And so we were doing this and maybe there were half of us left at the end of it. But so it was pretty brutal. And
hold on. So was there like particular measures that the teachers took to actually weed people out, like particular exercises?
Well, this was really kind of fascinating because it was this class started a month before the actual program started, and you had to be there. And they brought in a professor from outside. So that it could be somebody you could really hate. And they brought this guy in from the Sorbonne, who I will not name. And although this is 30 years ago, I'm sure he's retired by now. But in any case, we were there like every morning at 8 a.m. And it went all morning. And then every Saturday, there was a test. And this was the kind of thing where he would just like fling a piece of chalk at somebody and say, "You get up there at the board, prove this." And he would give us some mathematical thing to prove. And so we would start on our proof and he would start berating us. And then eventually he would just exasperated and run up and grab the chalk and throw it at somebody else and say, "You continue." And so it was.
I had a teacher at school that was like this, like, you just couldn't get away with this shit anymore. This is old school. Like we get like
this is very old school.
I had an old English teacher called Mrs. Jones that would literally, she was very old school. Even then she was old school. This is like the the early 2000s, and she would just be
Yeah.
like, "Is someone talking in my class?" And she'd just take a board rubber and just throw it at your head. and the best bit about this is that none of the other teachers ever, like, even though they knew it was wrong, like she couldn't behave like this anymore, none of them had the guts or the gall to say anything to her, because to be
Sure.
fair, there was a level of respect. She was a fantastic teacher. Like, if you were in her lesson, you would 100% do well and learn something.
Yeah.
But it's just her methods are a bit you can't be throwing board rubbers at kids' heads, man. You just can't.
Yeah, exactly. So we went through that, and then we got into the first semester there, and it's this microecon sequence, and it was one of those classes where there were whiteboards on all four walls of the room. And he would start with equations in the upper left front of the room, and he would keep going, and he would fill the boards all the way around each session as he was just lecturing constantly, and then he would start again and just like be erasing as he went through. And so finally one day he got to the end of the class and tossed the marker down and said, "Therefore, the consequence of this is that understanding humans is not essential to understanding economic systems." And everybody's just furiously writing away. And I had the temerity to raise my hand and say, "How can you justify that?" And he looked at me blankly, and everyone else in the class looked at me blankly. And he said, and he started pointing around and I said, "I'm not questioning your mathematics, I'm questioning your first principles." And everyone kind of looked at me like I had grown a third head. And then the bell rang and the class was over, and it was never answered. But at that point, I realized I was in the wrong field. So I'd gotten all the way to my doctorate in econ when I realized, it's the wrong field. So I made a lateral shift to sociology and psychology, and found a really good fit, and had a wonderful doctoral mentor who was a very senior, eminent scholar in the field, and I was his last doctoral student. And it was a profoundly wonderful, enriching educational experience. But I had to wander around a little bit to get there.
It's amazing how teachers in our lives can, and this comes in all fields, not just academia, but also just in general. Yeah, the different teachers in our lives can just kind of cause us to have these like light bulb moments sometimes. I remember
Definitely.
I had it with English class and business where, I wasn't like, I was a smart kid, but I wasn't, I doubted myself a lot. And I was never like, particularly great at like maths or science or any of that stuff. I liked science, didn't like maths, but I understood why it was necessary. But I lived for English and business. And I remember just like certain things clicking every now and again. Like I remember one time, and I always attribute this to the beginning of my education sort of going in the right direction. And it was a really important life lesson. I was about 14 at the time, 13, 14, wasn't particularly doing very well in my studies. And I was failing in business because I just started it. I didn't know what was going on. They'd lost all my work for a semester, so I had to redo it. Like I was very unmotivated. And my teacher sat me down. Shout out to Miss Sinelli. And she just said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" She said, "What do you want to do?" It's not often a teacher asks you that, right? So I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like,
I use that a lot with my advisees.
But it's like, "What's your goal? What do you want to achieve in this class?" And I just kind of sarcastically went, "I want to ace it," because I knew I was failing at the time. So I was like, "I want to ace the class." And instead of mocking me or saying like, "Oh, you can't do that," or "Let's set a more reasonable goal," she was like, "Okay, we're going to need to work very, very hard then." And I was like,
"Yeah."
And I didn't expect to hear that. And I was like, "Oh." And she's like, "If you want to do that, then we'll work together and we'll make that happen." And it was like, I don't know, there was almost like stars in my eyes at that moment, because I was like, "You're saying there's a chance?" And she was like, "Yeah." and I'll help you get there. And from that point onwards, I worked my absolute arse off, and I became like top of the class, and I aced the course, and I went to do the next level of it afterwards and everything. And it all started from that moment, and I attribute all that to her, and also the other supporting business teachers too, but her in particular, because she believed in me, and she had kids as well. So I think the mother instinct as well served her well. I think most of the time, if you've got children, you'll probably be a good teacher because you know how to talk to people younger than you and inspire them and say the right things. Because that's the thing, like people think that teaching, I think a lot of the time is, oh, you just need to teach them the right tools and they'll get there. And it's like, no, sometimes you need to just kind of inspire some self-belief in people and give them like this awakening moment, and then they go and achieve that goal, but you still need to give them that initial spark of realization that they can achieve it.
But I spent 15 years as a professor, and I still do education all the time. That's core to what I do. And you bring up a really important distinction, and that's this goal process distinction. And you can have a goal, and a goal is great, but you then have to answer the question, how am I going to get there? And then you have to go one step further, and you have to say, what are the resources and what is the help, the support that I'm going to need to make those steps? And then once you do that, you've got to take the goal and set it aside and focus on the process. And then you can pause every once in a while and stand and look up and say, oh yeah, I'm getting closer to my goal. Okay, I'll keep doing what I'm doing. Or you can look up and say, oh no, I'm getting further away from my goal. I need to make some changes. And then you tweak the trajectory, you maybe find different help, you find other resources, and you dive back in. Because it's always about the work. Because humans are learning animals. Every single second we are awake, we are always learning. The issue is, are you paying attention to what you are learning?
Mm-hmm.
Because often we're not. We're on autopilot. And so you're still learning something, but you're not aware of what it is you were learning. So you pay attention to yourself and you're like, oh, how did I get this bad habit? And you're like, oh, well, that's what you taught yourself through your experience when you weren't paying any attention.
Yeah. And there's two things that come to mind when you say this. One is understanding the significance of what you've learned and why it matters, which is why when I was at school and I would ask loads and loads of questions and I'd be told off for asking questions, I knew that was logically stupid of those teachers to say that, because you need to understand why you understand what you understand. And secondly, I remember like growing up, my mum would always make an effort to explain things in detail. And she was a young mum, and she would get mocked for that. People would be like, oh, why are you explaining that to him? He's a child. What are you doing? Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, I'm doing that because now he understands why I'm doing this. He understands I'm not being unfair. He understands the significance of why this is important. And
if a kid is developed enough to ask a question, the kid deserves an answer that they can use. Yeah. Period. Full stop.
Well, it also prevents, I mean, if we're talking just specifically about parenting, like it helps to eliminate that kind of parrot effect of you keep asking for the thing and you don't get it. If you explain why you can't get that thing, like, okay, no, don't put your hand there because you're going to burn it. If you just go, don't do it, it does nothing. It's pointless. But if you carefully explain, listen, this is really going to hurt you. I've accidentally hurt myself doing this. You don't want this. You put that person on the same level as you and you explain with respect. And that gets through to someone.
On the other hand, I tried that with my daughter when she was about 3 or so. She put her hand on the grill when I was grilling, and I explained it. And the next week she did it again. And then my
Yeah.
son this is even better. My son, when he was 2 or so he's toddling along, he grabs a metal paintbrush from his mother's studio.
Oh no.
And is toddling down the hall, and he sees an outlet, and he says, "Oh," and jams it in there, and there's like this and shock, and it shoots him back across the hall. He bounces on the wall, and he like shakes himself, grabs the paintbrush, toddles back over and jams it in again before anyone can get over to. So then he has like the baby Sneetch hair that's just sticking up in all directions, and like a black ring of carbonized around him. Fortunately, his mother happened to be on the phone with a friend of hers who was a nurse at the time, and she was able to check him out and everything, and he was okay. But sometimes you can have it explained to you, and you just need a little more experience.
I remember when I was like,
not that I ever did anything like that.
Of course not. No. But I did. When I was 2 years old, my mum's, we had those, I don't know if they have them in the States, but here in the UK, we were quite poor. And I remember one and only time we lived in a house when I was really young. But it was an old house, and the radiators were like, if you put, like, they would get so hot that you couldn't touch them. Like they would boiling, crazy heat.
Yeah, I shared a flat like that in Oxford.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
You know the one, it's like the really thin ones. It's weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And my mum explicitly told me, and we were sitting in the bathroom, she's like, "Don't put your hand on that." And I was like, "Why?" And she's like, "If you put your hand on that, it will burn. Do not do that." And she turns away, and I put my hand on it, and I'm like, "Ah!" And she's like, "What did I tell you?" But it wasn't like angry, screaming, anything. It was just like, "What did I tell you?" And then I just felt
matter
this,
of fact,
shame. I'm like, oh, and then that was where the lesson was learned. But no, to your point about like people really listening to things and understanding things, I think it brings up another point about like relationships as well, in the sense that, and this is how I learned to show empathy to people, because I didn't used to understand the concept of empathy, and I've spoken on the show about this before, so I'll be brief. But I remember kind of thinking that showing empathy is just like a nice hug and a chat and I give some advice. Wrong. No, empathy is really sitting and listening and being present and trying to explore what the problem actually is. Yeah, you hear words and you can listen and la 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 la, whatever, right? But that's just context. You're listening for what the problem really is, so then you know how to address it. And often that just comes from listening, but it's like, that's what you're looking out for. And that's the kind of what you were saying before about the significance of understanding why something is what it is. It's like, you're not listening to find out why this person's upset. You're listening to get to that point where it clicks and you're like, oh, they're upset about this thing. That's the real thing, not this thing that's just triggered them. Like, but this is the real problem, and this is what we need to work through.
Well, and people they know this at an intuitive level, but we have to be reminded that there are surface characteristics of the things that we're interested in, and then there are deep characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can hear, but not really listen. And the listening is an active process, it's an engaged process, and true empathy is about trying to put yourself in another person's circumstance. Now, here's the asterisk that goes on that, because while I will first say we all really, really, really need to do that, what we also need to understand is, if we look at the research on perspective taking, so how successful are you able to put yourself into another person's circumstance and accurately make attributions about what's going on?
Mm.
It turns out humans suck. at
Yeah,
making attributions
it's true.
correctly.
Yeah.
Okay. And the closest people in your lives, so say a domestic partner that you live with, the best case is you will be correct in the attributions that you make about half the time. And that's it. So we don't just need to perspective take. It's not just a matter of us actively listening and trying to make those attributions. We also have to perspective give, and we have to be receptive when they give their perspective to us. Because humans are resource misers. In other words, that's a really polite way of using academic speak to say we're lazy.
Yeah.
And we try to fill in the blanks all that we can. So we fill in the blanks with, about a particular person with what we know about people like them, quote unquote, about the roles that they have, about surface characteristics, things like that. And it turns out that we're all very diverse, and we don't necessarily fit neatly into those roles like we would like people to.
A key aspect of this, and I only say this because I often give people advice, friends and stuff like that. They come to me, and I used to think it was weird because I was always like, I don't have my shit together. I feel like now I do, but in the past, not so much. But I was always, the one reason I was able to give advice is because, it's like I had a friend that I was talking to and giving advice just before I came on today. And I said to this person, I was like, I know you, and the people that love you know you, and you should listen to us because we're not trying to give you advice that we think you want to hear or that we would do. We're telling you the stuff that you need to hear that's right for you because we know you. And that's a key part of this. Whenever you're given advice, like I make sure to always understand that I know the person properly, and I'm very hesitant to give anyone advice unless I know the whole story. I mean, I still will try every now and again, but I never feel like it's really, as you say, like a correct attribution. I don't think it's really proper unless you know the person, because if you know them, and I don't mean like the way they tick and stuff like that, but like from the core aspect, like their innermost desires, their fears, insecurities, everything in between. And you're like, okay, I know all of these things. This is the thing they're telling me about, but this is the deeper thing that's needs to be addressed. And then you relay the information that you know they need to hear based on the fact that you know them. And that's when you can sometimes get through to people. Obviously, they need to be receptive and hear it, but that's kind of the core aspect of that.
Well, I think one of the things that people forget about advice is it's not about you being an expert or a savior or anything else. What it really is, if you want your advice to stick, you don't tell them. You help them ask better questions.
Yep.
So that they can come to it themselves. And if they come to it themselves, they will accept it and they will be much more likely to act on it. But you can't be the sage on the stage or the guru or whatever it is. You've got to be humble and giving and questioning and curious and embody those values so that they can practice them and get better at them for themselves.
It's a pleasure talking to you, sir. Honestly, like I mean this, like I've been thinking a lot lately about the fact that I get to do this. I believe this will be episode 146, and I've been doing this close to 2 years now. And I've realized that I've become a better conversationist, better at listening, which is key, especially with what we're talking about. But I mean, I'm just so grateful I get to talk to all different types of people, get their backgrounds. And the funny thing is, like, doesn't matter what background someone comes from, everyone has something to offer. And you find yourself lost in these conversations. Like, I really lose myself in these conversations, and I sometimes forget that I have to steer it and actually make a proper show. And because that's the thing, like, I used to approach it as like, this is an interview and you need to make these certain questions, and to a degree, you know, you do need to kind of hit the various things that people are expecting to hear. But I always think that there's more interesting stuff to dig into when you start gauging someone's opinions on things, you know, and kind of, that's when you find yourself often like leading into things naturally, or even just touching on things that you probably never expected you would touch on. You know, it's just interesting.
You know, I think a good life is about collecting experiences. And that's not just experiences that I have, but experiences that I witness. And as a social and behavioral scientist, one of the things that really fascinates me and that I find truly a beautiful expression of our human experience, and that is expertise. And expertise is everywhere. And so I'll give you, for instance, so for several years, I lived in a small college town, and I had done my doctorate there, and I stayed on faculty for a few years afterward. And so I had this house on the street, and every week the trash collection would come by. And I would stand in this big picture window up the hill, you know, looking down, watching the trash come by and collect early in the morning on like a Wednesday morning when it came to our house. And I would watch, and there was this one guy who at the time was a middle-aged guy. And all I can say is he was obviously mindful and graceful in his work. And he had this beautiful economy of motion as he would grab the garbage and throw it into the truck. And it was, and people say, well, how do you find beauty in garbage collection? And it was like, no joke, every week I would make a point to just be there. When I would hear the truck coming, I would make a point to just stand there and watch, because this was a guy, and evidently his coworkers and his bosses recognized this too, because often there would be a new hire that was with him, and he would be training the new person. And so, I mean, for me, that is a beautiful flashbulb memory that humans can find ways to express beauty and connection and skill that has been developed through years of attention and practice in any activity. And it is up to us to recognize those things, because that makes us beautiful.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think the process of discovery for that is tough. And I know of myself, I've had times where I've questioned myself and I've wondered, am I worthless? Do I have nothing to contribute? And I've had friends that have said the same thing. And sometimes even the smallest things in our lives, you know, to us, you know, we're masterful in, and yet we don't even see it. And I always think it comes down to confidence, you know, like it really does.
Yeah, it does. And it also comes down to allowing yourself to see yourself as you really are, because the things that we tend to diminish about ourselves are the things that we have become so practiced and habituated in that others have not. And so it has become so commonplace for us that we no longer see the magic in the way that we do it.
It's true. Although I will say sometimes, as in, for instance, the example that you gave, when someone takes pride in what they do and they truly enjoy it, sometimes it is just beautiful experiencing and witnessing that, especially when they know and they're humble about it. They're like, yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
the thing that I enjoy, but they just make it look effortless. Like they're not even
Mm-hmm.
trying. And it's just watching a master at work.
Yeah, it truly is. It is what we technically call a flow experience.
Mm.
And for me, the most profound and probably salient personal examples of that for me are, well, on the one hand, working through a scientific problem, but there's not anything really interesting being a spectator on that, because it's just me sitting there looking, concerned and sometimes constipated. But the more profound example to witness, this happens in skydiving. And that is the thing that I love about it, because there in my book I talk about it, I call it the edge, and it's a ratio between what a task in front of you demands of you and the capacity you can deliver in that moment. And so if the demand is really low and your capacity is high, well, you're bored. And if it's a little higher, then, well, this is in the area of habit and you're not really paying attention. And as the demand gets a little higher, now it's you're engaged. But then it approaches the limits of what you can successfully do. And these are called flow experiences. And this, it's when you are challenged, but you are confident and you are not overwhelmed, and you know that you are performing at the peak of your capacity. And this is a beautiful human expression. But the issue is, and it's stressful, because people don't, we misunderstand stress. Stress can be good, it's called eustress. Stress can be bad, it's called distress. And the thing is, eustress and distress, good stress and bad stress, are right next to each other at the edge. When your capacity is just a little bit more than what you need to deliver, that's eustress. And it's still triggering your acute stress response. It's still triggering your sympathetic nervous system. However, it ticks up just a little bit more, and now the demand is a little bit more than what you can deliver, and you are overwhelmed and you will fail. And the thing that people say is, they say, oh, don't get stressed. You need to reduce stress in your life. Well, that's a load of BS. Because
it is.
because if you pull yourself back from the potential of the bad stress, you pull yourself back from the potential of the good stress. And this is where we find our value and our joy in our lives. And so, no, we have to learn how to reframe stress.
I had the perfect example of this earlier this week, where basically, so I work like freelance, right? I don't work every day. I work about 4 days a week. And I basically work all the time. I'm workaholic. But I find time to relax and be lazy too. It's balance. Anyway, point is, I've had an influx of demand in the podcast lately as far as guests are concerned. So I just decided to run with it. I'm like, you know what? Let's just get it all done now. And I'll put myself ahead. I'll pre-schedule this stuff. I'll take advantage of the situation and I'll have a good time. But obviously, since time is the key aspect to this, what it means is that it's fine if it's a day off, a weekend, that's no problem, right? But when it's a day of the week when I've got sort of a day job, I've got to then finish that thing, then go straight to doing the podcast and editing the podcast and scheduling the podcast. And then on top of that, I had additional other work that I was doing. And it got to a particular day where, I had, you call it eustress, is that right?
Yeah, eustress, eustress.
Eustress. So I experienced that, and I've experienced that several times where, as you say, like you get into that zone where you've got a little bit too much work and you have that moment where you think, how am I going to get this done? But then you just start doing it. You start the doing, and you get into, as you call it, the flow state, and then you just start doing it. And before you know it, you've already done it. And then that's when you de-stress, if you like, and just relax.
Right.
But it's after having embraced the stress and use it as like part of like what you are. And I always bring up this example because I think it's amazing and people should go out of their way to find this. There's a interview with David Bowie sometime in the 90s, and I can't remember exactly what the question is, but someone asks him about his work, and he basically says the best state you want to be in is to be, basically, imagine that you're in the deep end of a pool and your feet are not quite touching the floor, but your head is above the water, so you're not drowning. And he said, basically, that's the state you want to be in perpetually. So you're just a little bit out of your comfort zone, but you're not so far out that you're, completely out of it. You're just a little bit out, always reaching a little bit out. And that's the perfect space to be.
And that's really crucial because, like, to continue this, this metaphor. So if your demand is a little bit over your capacity, you're overwhelmed and you fail. If it's a little bit more than that, so now it's noticeably more, you will get injured from it. And if it is a lot more than what you can deliver at that point, then this is what trauma is.
Yes.
That is actually what trauma is. And the crucial thing to understand is we've got physical edges, we've got cognitive edges, we've got emotional edges, we've got social edges, we've got operational edges, we've got all sorts of edges. And something may not be, say, a cognitive edge. We may, in the abstract, know how to do it, but it may be emotionally really difficult for us to do. So in other words, I know the right thing to do, but doing that, in that experience, I have to confront a lot of negative emotions that I'm not prepared to handle. I'm still going to fail. And on the other end, I may get really angry at myself because I think I know what to do. Well, yes, you knew what to do. You could make that cognitive edge, but you couldn't make the emotional edge. And we learn, remember I said we always learn. So we're always learning in one of two ways. We're either edge learning. This is growth. This is where growth happens, always. This is the trigger to growth. So physically, that's like, pushing yourself to failure lifting weights, right? But it's also cognitively, emotionally, socially, all that stuff. Or we're doing what's called habituated learning. And so that's down in our comfort zone. And that's pushing things down into automaticity, right? So the thing is, if we want to, humans are always either growing or atrophying. We're growing or dying, one of the two. That's period. So you have to regularly have those growth experiences of all different kinds, but you can't live there because you're triggering your acute stress response. So if you grow, now you've got to pull yourself back to what I call your home, away from the edge, and you've got to rest, relax, recover, nourish, sleep, all that stuff, because the trigger for the growth is at the edge, but the actual growth happens when you back off and allow your system to repair.
2 years ago, when I returned from Estonia, I was living in Estonia for 3 years, and a lot had happened. I'd basically gone to university in England, and then for 3 years, and then straight away I'd gone to Estonia, and then I came back. So it's basically like 5 to 6 years of just constant stuff going on, constant stressful situations, unfamiliarity, all sorts of stuff, constantly being out of my comfort zone and on the edge. And it's interesting the timing. This is why I wanted to bring this up. So I returned to the UK in February 2020, moved to a new city. So the stress didn't really stop. And then once I'd kind of got my place to live and I'd settled down, I basically de-stressed. I basically just sat down and had time to think. And then I did exactly what you're talking about, where I then started processing the last 6 years of my life. And it was a lot. I mean, you know, the human mind works in mysterious and amazing ways. And for me, it's very intrusive. Like my brain just never stops thinking, and that's useful, but also a hindrance. And you know,
Yeah.
and I imagine many of us are like that sometimes. And do you know, I will say, if you're able to find a way to switch off, mazel tov to you, well done. That's incredible, because I really struggle from that sometimes, and
It's taken me years of meditative practice to build that, and
but that,
I'm still far from perfect.
but that's the key though, isn't it? It's like that conscious effort to actually take the time to do that. Like for me, I needed to just take time to just sit down and just think and chill. And then through that, I started just thinking about stuff and coming to terms with certain things and really learning the lessons that I hadn't actually learned when I was dealing with them. And I put that down to what you were talking about, which is the stress factor. It's like you're dealing with all this stuff and you don't quite learn the lesson straight away. Like people say, learn the lesson.
Right.
Learn from the lesson. It's like, but you need to sit down and actually absorb and think about the lesson. And that's not a conscious thing either. It's like you go for a walk in the forest, the thought comes up in your head and you're just walking around, and then it suddenly just clicks and dawns on you, and then it's like, and it's so similar in every other field. That's why when you said earlier that, you know, you were surprised there was a link between creativity and science, you know, I thought the same thing when I was growing up, and now I'm just like, no, it makes perfect sense. Creativity is in everything. But this kind of thought process that we have, doesn't matter if you're a mathematician, a scientist, an artist, rocket scientist, whatever, that doesn't matter what your career is, everyone can relate to this, where you've got a problem, you can't figure it out, and you're like, and you just stop and you just, I don't know, walk away, you have a cigarette, you go do your business. And then while you're doing that stuff, it just comes to you. Maybe you're on the treadmill and you're just running and it clicks, or you go out for a drive and it clicks, or just sitting, you know, enjoying the Sunday weather and it clicks. You know, it's like those moments when you take that time, or through meditation, as you mentioned, your method, you know, it's whatever your method is, whatever your vice is, whatever, you know, your thing that makes you wind down is, that's where the answer will come.
Well, you've got to have the preparation. So you've got to have the resources and experience that you have built, and you can't skip a step here. You can't suddenly go 10 steps forward, 20 steps forward, because you will be traumatized, right? We've already established that. This is so you've got to go step by step by step. And you've got to have the triggering experience. So that is that edge experience where your system is motivated to grow. Because if you just sit on the couch with you know, your Cheetos or Weetabix or whatever it is, watching Netflix all the time, try to be multicultural there, and then your system is learning that it can work down to those expectations all the time.
Right.
Now I'm saying, you know, I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying don't do that all the time, because our system will learn up or learn down, because we're resource misers. Okay. And we will try to efficiently do what our environment, what we expect our environment is going to demand of us. And so we are learning in those ways. So you got to go to the edge, but then you've got to disengage that sympathetic nervous system, engage your parasympathetic nervous system, right? Because the sympathetic nervous system is the acute stress response, called the fight or flight response. It's really actually a lot more than fight or flight. It's more like freeze, front, flight, fight, fawn, flock, fright, faint. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. I call it the F it response.
I knew it was never that straightforward. When they taught me that in psychology class, I was like, no way is it that black and white. Nothing in life is that black and white. Come on.
Yeah, it is not nearly that black and white. But that does particular things to our system and to the way we think and the way we see ourselves and the possibilities we see in the world. So we've got to back off because now we've triggered an edge. Now we got to back off and engage that parasympathetic nervous system, also called the feed and breathe system or the rest and digest system. And what that is about comfort and safety and security,
right,
so that you can nourish and rest and recover and consolidate and grow, so that next time you go out to the edge, your edge is a little bit further. You're a little more competent there.
amazing stuff. In the course of that earlier, you mentioned about your book. So your book is called Your Life Live Your Life Lived
Your
Well.
life
Sorry, there you
lived
go.
well.
Your Life Lived Well. So talk to us a little bit about this book, the process of creating this book, what led up to that, and why people should read it.
I do, Your Life Lived Well is the name of the company, it's the name of the book, it's the name of the seminars that I do, it's the name of my podcast, all of it. That is the brand. And for me, there were a couple of things. So one thing that we haven't really talked about here is that I live with multiple sclerosis, and I was first symptomatic with MS in 1989, and I was correctly diagnosed in 2006. And MS is, there are about 2.8 million people in the world right now diagnosed living with MS. So it is a relatively common rare disease. And it is an autoimmune neurodegenerative condition. So my nervous system is being eaten up. The myelin in my central nervous system, my brain and spinal cord, is being eaten up by my confused immune system. So that means that everything I do, think, feel, say, hope, dream, whatever, passes through my central nervous system. And wherever I get damage is wherever I get symptoms. So the symptoms of MS, I'm in chronic pain. I have chronic fatigue. I'm chronically confused. My legs don't work right sometimes. I've got, parathesias, which are random feelings that don't actually exist. I've got over 30 symptoms that come and go.
Wow.
And so it is a real grab bag. And one of the things that it did to me was I came to a point in my life where my condition had gotten very bad, and I lost everything that I cared about. My career had exploded, my family had exploded, my dog even died on me. And yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
And then 3 days after my dog traumatically died in front of me, I was struck by lightning almost. It hit the tree right next to me and knocked me off my feet and blinded me and deafened me. And so, I really felt like Job at that point.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you start to feel like, is there a curse on me or something?
Yeah.
Christ.
And I literally had come to a point in my life where I couldn't see a path from where my life was to any kind of life I was interested in living. And my right about that time, because my son was the last one to leave, and he said, Dad, you really suck at doing things for yourself. And I realized that, so I got a PhD in people, I got all the knowledge, but I had become so consumed being the dad, being the husband, his, supporting his mother through a decade of cancer, keeping a roof over our heads as a sole income of a family of 4 with 2 small kids and all that stuff. I had let my own self-care go by the wayside, because it was always, we'll get through this next crisis and then I'll be able to catch up with that. And we just never would. There was one crisis after another for 10 years. And so I realized that, he had never seen me do something just for myself.
Okay.
And I was like, wow. So I knew that I had spent the last 20 years or so always being the expert in the room, being the professor, being the expensive consultant, being whatever. And I had stopped taking care of myself, and I'd given up on myself. And I had been betrayed by my body, by the MS, in so many ways over the years that I had become terrified of my own body. The thing I feared most in the world was locked in my carcass with me. And all of those fight or flight, quote unquote things that we talked about earlier that I mentioned, all those strategies are about getting distance between you and the thing that you fear. Mm-hmm. But I can't get distance from my own body. And a lot of times the thing that we fear most in the world is something that we can't get away from. So we have to learn to reframe it and accommodate it and work creatively around it and through it. And so I said, I'm going to give myself one more chance. And literally, this was my last chance I was giving myself. That's not an overstatement. I said, I'm going to use my science and skydiving to save myself, because I'd wanted to be a skydiver from the time I was a little kid. I started doing the training in the 90s for the first time, got a handful of jumps in, and then a lot of life got in the way. And eventually my condition got so bad that I gave up on it. So I said, okay, I need to do something just for myself that there's no practical reason for, like jumping out of a quote unquote perfectly good airplane a lot. And I need to do something that takes me to my edge and allows me to build confidence in my wonky body that I had lost. And so a lot of people come to skydiving because they're afraid of heights. That's not my issue. I mean, I'd had enough jumps, in the 90s that I knew what I was going to be into. When I came back to skydiving in 2019, it was, I didn't know whether I could pass the training because my body is weird. And, I can't feel my legs below my knees. And you've got to be able to control your legs in free fall, or you start spinning and tumbling out of control. It's difficult to stand up a landing on a parachute when you can't feel your feet. So, I had some exceptional challenges that I had to get through. And normally it takes 25 jumps to get your A license in skydiving. That's the first of 4 licenses. It took me 47 because I had to do a lot of extra training on the ground. I had to spend a lot of time in a wind tunnel with an instructor holding my legs in exactly the right position so that I could say, okay, I can't feel what's going on with my legs, but I can get consistent feelings at the tendons behind my knees. And so I could learn to interpret those signals and say, okay, when my tendons feel like this is what my leg is doing. Wow. So I had to get creative and work within my limitations and work around it, and I managed to do that. So in 2019, I logged about 140 jumps. I got my A and my B license. In 2020, I set myself a bigger goal, and I said, I'm going to become a legit skydiver. And what that means is passing 500 jumps in the sport, because that's where you are eligible for all the licensing. That's where you're eligible for professional ratings. And so if I was going to do that in 2020, that means that I was going to have to jump on average once a day for the entire year. Jeez. And so I set myself that goal, and I logged 370 jumps in 2020 and got through the licenses, earned a coach rating, and became a legit skydiver. Now, am I an expert? Far from it. I've got 600 some jumps now, and later today, I'll probably be out at the drop zone and get a jump in because the weather's nice. But it was an edge for me, physically, mentally, emotionally, because, and here's the thing. So you see the cover of my book, and if people can't see it, it's me at 5,000 feet. And there's the sun is on the horizon. There's these beautiful clouds below me. And this was the exact image I wanted on the cover of my book. And it took us 8 jumps over 6 weeks to capture this image. And it tells the story of everything that I do. And here's what it is. So I'm in street clothes. So no helmet, no jumpsuit, nothing like that. I'm in jeans and a sweater, and I look like a guy, a quote unquote normal guy off the street who is thrust into this extraordinary circumstance. And that's what it feels like when you get a chronic diagnosis that you're never going to get better from. Feels like your life is in free fall, like the bottom has been taken away from you. So at that instant, I'm 5,000 feet above the earth, and I'm headed to the earth at 120 miles an hour. Now, what that means in practical, real terms, not exaggerating, my life expectancy is now 27 seconds if I do nothing at that point. You can be absolutely certain that if I do nothing when that photo is taken, I would have been dead 27 seconds later. So what am I doing? I've got my hands up to my forehead, and I'm doing something that every skydiver in the world recognizes. It's called the wave off. You bring your hands up to your forehead and you sweep them out broadly. And what I'm doing is I'm warning everyone in my airspace that I am about to take action to save myself. And so I wave off and I deploy my parachute. What I am doing in the face of certain death is choosing actively for life. And that's what I want people to understand. If you're going to make your life better, it's going to start. Even if it's out of control, even if you're overwhelmed, you are going to have to actively choose life.
At what moment did you realize through your skydiving that it was actually a wider metaphor for your life and all of your struggles that you were dealing with?
You know, I had a sense of that going back to it. I mean, it truly is, you know, if you're a fan of the Stoics, it truly is a memento mori. It is an active acknowledgement that we are going to die, but not today, because I am going to choose living. And to do that repeatedly, to be a middle-aged guy with a wonky central nervous system who can day after day after day fling his body happily from a perfectly good aircraft, have a lot of fun, you know, for 60 or 70 seconds in the meantime, and then save myself every time and land it on target. That is a massive amount of confidence that I can then carry into the rest of my life.
So how did you actually start doing that? Because obviously it's one thing to do what you know you needed to do, which is something for yourself, and to, you know, and you know, you've kind of already partially answered the question as much as you recognize that this diagnosis that you had is not a hindrance. It's just basically saying to you, okay, this is the hand you've been dealt. And instead of resisting it, you've got to find a way to adapt to it, and rather adapt to that situation and then make life work for you within the confines of that. So in essence, I guess my question is, how did you begin to do that elsewhere?
Well, it's an invitation to be creative. And it goes back to this edge idea. And this is chapter 4 of the book. And it goes back to something I briefly touched on earlier, and that is being humble. And so one of the things that happens is, with a chronic illness, there are probably going to be some of your capacities that are going to be greatly curtailed. Now, that doesn't mean that they're always going to have to be there, but that means that you've got to honestly acknowledge where they are right now so that you can systematically work on trying to grow them, or work on trying to be creative and work around them or through them or whatever it is. And so I had to first take a brutally honest stock of where my capacities currently were. And that wasn't a very flattering view of myself,
Right.
because I was living with chronic pain and chronic fatigue and chronic confusion, and those are all still with me, but I've managed to, again, through meditation and exercise and cognitive reframing, I used to, there were several years there where my pain on a standard 11-point pain scale was a 6 to 8 every day. That's bad. That's getting in the way of your life. And it did. Now I still feel pain, but it's a 1 to 3.
Do you feel it all the
day.
time, or just at particular moments? So it's not like continuous pain.
No, it's all the time.
So
but
even
even right now. Yeah, but it varies in. So it can feel like stinging. It can feel like electric shocks. It can feel like something thudding dully in the background. It's always variable in my experience, because it's not about physical damage. That's nociceptive pain, where you've got nerves in your skin that are detecting a noxious stimuli. This is neurogenic pain.
Yeah.
It's because of damage in my brain. So it's not a signal, it's noise. And I've had to learn to operate through it.
I know you gave some examples of things like, working out and doing things like yoga, meditation, that kind of thing. But I mean, how do you kind of, I'm sorry to put it in such a blunt way, but how do you stop yourself from going crazy, like feeling constant pain? Because I mean, when I think about, I don't know, a particular pain that I've got, or a sickness or something like that that's lasted a bit too long, it does start to get to you. It's irrational, because you know that it will go away, but this is something that never goes away. So like, how do you reconcile that? Like, is it just like you build up a resiliency to it, or is there like steps you have to take to kind of deal with that? Like, how do you do that?
So I mentioned this issue of cognitive reframing.
Right.
So if we look at the last 20 years of pain science research, okay, we have a very different understanding of pain now than we did a generation ago. And of course, the problem is most medical health wellness professionals, so like a physician, through their course of training, on average, unless they are a specialist in pain, on average will get somewhere between 2 and 4 hours of education on pain. And why? That's because there's as my son would say, a metric crap ton of stuff that they have to learn. And there's all kinds of other stuff. So yeah, 2 to 4 hours of pain. So if for example, somebody were to go to my podcast and look at, listen to my episode on pain management.
Okay.
They would walk away from that episode with somewhere between half and a fourth as much education as their physician has about pain. And it would probably be more up to date with the latest research than what their education was whenever they got it. Okay? And so I used that word nociception earlier, which is the name for physical pain, crushing, burning, rending, tearing, physical damage. That's a signal, okay? And it's not irrational, it's not non-rational, it's pre-rational. And this is a really important distinction in how you frame it, okay? So our pain system is older than our rationality, and it happens faster than our rationality. So your pain signals are going to get processed, and your basal brain has already made a decision about it before you are even consciously aware of it. That's how fast it happens, because our frontal lobes, our quote unquote higher cognition, our which I like to think of as our recent brain, not our our primal brain, is slower because it's more nuanced, it's more abstract, it's doing a lot more, it's seeing more. So what you have to understand is that when you get that signal of pain, it is not only a neurological signal. It has been layer upon layer of somatic systems and emotional systems and your experience and all of that stuff, right? That's already been layered on it, and it's either ramped up your experience of the pain or it's brought it back down before you ever experience it. So pain, and especially chronic pain, is a complex, layered phenomenon.
Is this why when people talk about like the pain threshold and the ability to experience more or less pain, I mean, in a way, what you're kind of implying is if someone has kind of reconciled and come to terms with the idea of pain and taking it on, that's how they're then able to take on more. Or
yes.
Yeah, because like,
yes.
okay, I'll take like a professional wrestler as an example. There's a guy called Mick Foley. People might know him as Cactus Jack, Mankind, Dude Love in the States. It's besides the point. The thing, and anyone who's not familiar with wrestling, just Google Mick Foley, Undertaker, I don't know, Payne, whatever. You'll see a lot of documentaries where he talks about pain and his threshold and kind of not. Like he sometimes he says he kind of likes the pain, but I think that it's a combination of maybe adrenaline, doing what he does and stuff like that. But I think it's also genuinely he just doesn't feel pain in the same way that other people do. And I always wondered if that came down to just being born able to do that, or if it's just something that, as you say, you can like work on and then be able to then take on more pain because you recognize that it's not. I'm really wording this badly, but
so
not as painful.
No. Let me jump in here. So two things. One, we all have baselines for every kind of thing that a human does, including our pain tolerance. And so some people, with regard to a particular goal, may be more or less blessed naturally to begin with. But then from those baselines, we either grow or we atrophy,
right?
Depending on what we use or not. So, for example, the thing that is, and I know people are going to think this sounds weird, but what I had to learn was that I just don't care about pain. And that's really what it was. Now, let me tell you the downside of this. Okay. So it's about 6 years ago or so, I had gotten my pain threshold dropped down by this point. And it was still pretty new to me. So I'd literally gone from, there were several years there where I was taking 24 ibuprofen a day.
Damn.
Which is really bad for you. But I refused to take opioids because I wasn't going to go there.
Yep.
And none of the other, like gabapentin's often prescribed for this, and they prescribed it to me. It did nothing for the pain. And so, I tried some other stuff and it didn't. But ibuprofen, a lot of ibuprofen took a little bit of the edge off. But it was difficult for me to function. And so I had finally ratcheted it down to something normal. So I go in for an annual checkup with my GP, with my physician. And I have my shirt off and he's doing an exam. And he kind of looks strangely at my torso. And he walks up to me and he pokes me, kind of like the Pillsbury Doughboy. And a couple times he looks. And then he asked me to drop trowel and he does some more examining. And then he steps back and he looks at me and he says, "How are you still walking?"
All right. Okay.
And I said, huh? And he said, you have a massive triple hernia. I had both inguinals and the epigastric. And he slotted me for an immediate surgery, and they went and did all three at once. And he said, most people are just doubled over in pain because of this. And
Wow.
I didn't notice.
Oh, of
I didn't
course.
notice
Yeah.
because I had not yet learned to discriminate the kinds of pain. I had managed to successfully not care and dial down the kind of pain, but I had you can't presume that all the pain that I'm going to be living with is multiple sclerosis pain. There are other kinds of pain. I'm not immune from everything else that happens in life. And so I had to learn to regain my discrimination.
That's incredible. I mean, I've heard stories of this before, but like that's just amazing. I mean, I think the
Yeah, it was
biggest
pretty
thing.
wacky.
No, I think it's something to be applauded. This ability to find strength within yourself to, not take the hard drugs like opioids and stuff, because that would be, if you're in a lot of pain, that's certainly a place you can go. And I mean, I mentioned professional wrestlers earlier, like a lot of them, especially in the 90s, 80s, etc., took like painkillers to get through the pain, and then they obviously became addicted to painkillers. But you didn't go down that route, so then you chose, well, what is the other option? Building your mental fortitude, being able to reconcile that pain and work through it and come to terms with it. And that takes, I think, a tremendous amount of strength from within. So yeah, it's incredible.
Well,
Congratulations.
and I don't want to frame it like that, because I'm just a guy, right? And this is not an unattainable thing. What
No.
it does mean is you've got to start really, really small
Mm-hmm.
with like humiliatingly small baby steps.
Yep.
And you've got to cultivate a lot of patience. And you've got to become willing to let yourself fail
Mm.
and to try it again, right? Because you're slowly building that edge. And I want to make sure that people understand this is not like a superhuman thing that this guy who spends his time flying through the sky all the time does. Although I do track through the sky like Iron Man, so that's kind of cool. But it is a
Did you
very
ever
human.
did you ever
Do what?
cosplay just for the fun of it while you were
No,
doing it?
I have not.
You should think about
But I tell you, what the fun thing about? Yeah, it would be fun. When we're on our belly, in the belly to earth position, like I am on the front of the book, we're going at about 120 miles an hour. If you then sweep your arms back and extend your legs like Iron Man,
Yeah.
so that you are now in what's called a tracking position, you can accelerate from about 120 miles an hour to 200 miles an hour or
Right.
faster in a second.
Wow, that quick. Jeez.
So suddenly it's like, and you are streaking through the sky, and I can tell you, you really do feel like a superhero, because I'm not a religious person, but the only way I can explain it is when you hit that track position and you get into the groove, it suddenly feels like the hand of God just picks you up and pushes you through the sky. And it is just this mind-blowing, transcendent experience.
When I was doing my research notes on everything into you, like I found the whole concept just interesting in general, and obviously an inspiring story, but I had no idea that like skydiving was so intrinsically linked to your recovery process in every sense. And I think it's just an amazing, powerful story. And I know that everyone listening to really take away something from this, because
I mean, it's not
incredible.
just a surface thing. It is truly intrinsic to me. And I'm not suggesting that other people jump out of a perfectly good airplane. What I am suggesting is that I'm using this as a very visceral, evocative, salient example for for people to look at and say, wow. But what's important is that it was an edge experience, and I was doing it for me.
Mm.
It was about self-care. So what I'm encouraging is that everybody has something that is an edge for them, that they want to grow and explore and become better at in some way. And everybody has something that they can do just for themselves, just because this is something that makes you feel happy, satisfied, functional, engaged, meaningful, secure, whatever it is. It's it fulfills one of those deep human values that we need, and that you should find that and do it and make a place for it and honor it and be humble about it, and let yourself be open to not a pre-programmed experience, but the growth and the beauty that can be found and discovered there. And yeah, for me, that's screaming through the sky at terminal velocity. But we have edges everywhere, and you find yours.
Brilliant message. Thank you. You've had over 50 guest appearances and counting on other podcasts. I just wondered, how effective has this been for sort of creating awareness about your projects and what you do and sharing your message in general? Because, I mean, I've appeared on a few shows now, maybe 5 to 10 over the course of the last, it's about a year and a half of doing this show. And yeah, I think the biggest thing I've gained from it is just making connections and, reaching new people. But I wondered how effective it's been for you, and if you'd recommend it as well.
Fascinating question. And my short answer is, I'm not doing it for short-term returns.
Right.
I mean, I'm doing it for, making the connections and it's planting seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And so, are people starting to connect with me and do that? Yeah, they are. And the cool thing about these appearances, and now it's podcast, TV, radio, and I'm getting, and I'm starting to get inquiries from people with larger and larger markets.
Yeah.
So that's part of it as well. But fundamentally, it's about, I get to have really cool conversations with somebody else, and you're going to ask me different questions and see different things out of it than I do, and that anybody else I've talked to has. And I can truly say I've done actually almost 100 of these in the past few months, and there's a bunch of them that aren't out yet. And what I found, one, is really encouraging, because people have said, yeah, we'd love to have you on our show, and this is really interesting, and they find it valuable, and I'm humbled because I have spent my entire life studying people, trying to make something useful out of it. And I will digress with a really quick story. So when I said earlier that I was really fortunate to have a very senior scholar and be his last doctoral student, and Bruce was, he was in his 70s when I defended, and he was born 28. He was actually a third generation PhD, and he was born in 28. And,
wow.
and he got his doctorate in the 50s. And so he was really eminent, and we were really close. And when he passed away a few years ago, his kids asked me to deliver one of his eulogies at his service, and I was really honored for that. But I will never forget when you earn a PhD, the graduation ceremony is called a hooding. And you know that higher education is one of these last bastions of a delightfully medieval sensibility. And we have, the more education you get, the more decorative your robes get. And the hood is that decorative sash that goes around you with your doctoral robes. So you go up on stage and your advisor, who has shepherded you through years of mentorship, is the one who puts the sash over you and hoods you. So Bruce was a bear of a man. He was a giant man, and I'm average size. And so he, put put the sash around me, and he took me in this bear hug, and he leaned into me, and he said, and out there, my parents are out there, and my wife is out there, and she's very, very pregnant with our son at the time, and he leans into me and he whispers, "Now go do something meaningful with this privilege you've earned."
Wow.
And for me, I have had the privilege to spend my life studying humanity. And I love that. And I understand that what an amazing thing that we live in a society where somebody can actually devote their life to doing something like that, and not, something so practical like defending us from bears, right? And it's my responsibility, because I've been able to do that, to bring something back for other people. And for me, Your Life Lived Well is that thing, because a lot of people have devoted themselves to the question, how do you build a good life? It goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks and the study of eudaimonia, with EU, daimonia, eudaimonia, good life, like good stress, right? Same Greek root. And for me, I had a little bit different question that I have been fascinated with for years. And that is, how can you build a good life when you are stuck with something bad that you can't get away from? And if I can shed light on that question for other people and contribute to that conversation, then I consider that something meaningful that I can share.
I think this point you make about contributing to life is a really fascinating concept, because I remember when I was growing up, I was a very negative-minded person. I wasn't in a great place. And, throughout the course of my 20s, I've gotten to a positive place, and it's always getting better. But I think the key thing I've learned, which I see patterns of everywhere I look, it's everywhere. In short, it's reverse psychology with everything. The thing you want, you have to do the reverse of. So, you want a wife, you want a woman, you need to not be desperate and play it cool, no matter what your heart is telling you, right? That's just a small example. But with the bigger things that we're talking about, like making something of your life, it sounds like such a big ask. And the reality is, it doesn't have to be. I think a lot of the time, when you dedicate your life and you work hard to creating something that can benefit other people in a big way, that's when you start getting what you want and becoming successful, because it's no longer just about you. It's about this bigger thing that you're trying to achieve,
Yeah, and it's not, and it's no longer about other people's judgment. I mean,
right.
For me, it is fundamentally about me slogging through day after day, year after year, and trying to build the best thing that I can from all this research. Because I've interviewed hundreds, surveyed thousands, I collected millions of data points, I did meta-analyses across thousands of studies, and have I made mistakes? Sure. Is somebody going to do something better? Sure. Do I personally feel as if I have done the best thing that I can to add something of value to this human conversation that has been going on for thousands of years and will continue thousands of years after me. I hope so.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's it. And then other people, some people like it and some people won't, and I don't care. I really don't. It's like Payne. I don't care. I care that I've done the best that I could in this moment, and it's something that I want to share, and that I hope somebody can get some value out of, and that people are telling me they are getting value out of.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I mean, with your life, there's kind of like a transition, which is interesting. Because for me, it was the transition from being less selfish and being more selfless. And don't get me wrong, I still spend a lot of time working on myself, and I still put myself forward in so much as the things I do. But the key in that, and that's the point I really want to hammer home, is that the things that you're doing, do they benefit others in some shape or form? And sometimes you have to spend a lot of time working on yourself in order to do that. So a really good example of what I mean, because it sounds really cryptic and silly at this point, is to make others happy, you must first be happy yourself. And it sounds like such an obvious point, right? But it's so important. I see time and time again, I see like in relationships, people are just miserable. And I always say the same thing to them, which is you need to be happy yourself first and foremost, because how can you expect to make that other person happy? So it all starts.
If you don't have the energy and resources to give to others, well, you've got to keep going yourself to begin with, and you've got to do the things in you that build those resources so that you can then be giving.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's my point. Exactly. Like this idea of self-care and self-development and being the best version of yourself will benefit others, because throughout the course of doing that, you will help others. You'll be able to do that more and more as you keep growing, because in the same way, like a flower, when it roots up and it becomes, the best version of itself, others benefit from that. But only once it's gotten to that point. I just find that really interesting how that works. This, because you can get accused of being selfish and only focusing on yourself, and sometimes that might be true if you're reaping the rewards of what you do, but then you're not sharing that with anyone else in any way. But I think a lot of the time, the lesson that has to be learned there is this idea of sharing is the key to being happy in life. You want to share happiness and success with others. And to get to the bigger point that I wanted to make with this, it's like you worked so hard on yourself for such a long time, and it was this personal battle, and you overcame so many obstacles, and you got to this point where you overcame it. But then it was like, well, what do I do now? And it's like, well, you share that story, because that's an inspiring story. That's a story that people need to hear. That metaphor that you're making with skydiving and multiple sclerosis and everything you had to go through, that's a message that people can relate to and understand. It's a powerful message. I think about like the reason I do this show. When I first started, the reason I did it was just purely selfish. I wanted to do it because I liked it, and because, maybe one day I'll become successful and famous and blah, 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 blah. I don't do it for that reason anymore. I do it because I love having good conversations with people and sharing their stories and learning from them and sharing them with people around the world that will be listening to this or watching this. And that to me is an inspiring thing, because I think about this concept that you don't know who's listening and watching it. And you don't know how that might then inspire them to have the confidence within themselves to do great things themselves. And that kind of goes back to what your professor said to you in your ear. It's the same exact thing.
It is. And here's the most difficult thing for me about all of this. And that was, I wrote this book twice. I have gone through a rebranding. I did a lot of stuff. And that is because, for me, the most important thing is the science.
Okay.
Because the science is, And the science is not about having one way to solve yourself, because short answer here is there are 150 different ways to change your behavior. And ultimately, if you are not happy with your life, if you have something bad that you have to face in your life, fundamentally that devolves to behavior and mindset change. You're going to have to do something different to get a different result. And you're going to have to change your way you see the world, change what you're doing in the world, change your relationships, change your environment, something. Well, there are 150 different ways to do that. And if you look at the research, and I have, and all of those will work for someone, but only some of them will work for you. And the ones that work for you right now will not work for you in 6 months or 6 years, because you will change and the problems will change and so forth. So I'm not interested in pushing a method. I'm interested in giving people the tools so that they can continually make better choices for themselves. And again, to go back what we were talking about, choose life in this moment with the tools that work for you right now. So the science is the important thing to me. But, and here's the big but, for a long, long time, for two reasons, I was unwilling to share my own story. One, because it's not about me. It's about the science. And I truly fundamentally believe that. However, if people don't know me, then, and they just get the science, then what it sounds like is Dr. Payne, science guy, talking down to everybody else.
Yeah.
And what I have to have people understand is that, yeah, I'm Dr. Payne, science guy, but I have lived through all of this, and my life has been ripped up completely because of all this. And I have all of the compassion in the world for everyone who is going through this. And so I had to be willing to put my story out there so that, yeah, maybe it's inspiring and people find that inspiring, cool. Again, I just want people to take the science and use the science and understand the science and put that, because inspiration lasts for about this long. You can listen to this podcast and think, wow, that's a really inspiring story. And then, it's like a bath. You got to do it every day or you're going to stink. And if you're not continually inspired, you're going to be depressed about the whole thing. So it lasts about this long. What lasts after that, I'm concerned with what we do after the inspiration fades. Because I want people to be, I want people, sure, be inspired, cool. But inspiration affects our primal brain. And it's only about this long. So now use that little bit of inspiration, that little bit of motivation to take the first step in humbly, carefully, consistently, even with all the failures, start interrogating your edges and building your new habits, because those will last you forever.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
That I've ever received? No means next.
I like that. That's good.
When life tells you no, it's not an end. Next.
Sometimes short but sweet really is the best thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I like that one.
What's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
It all starts with kindness. No joke. It all starts with kindness. And that begins with you being kinder to yourself. And what I mean by that is all of us treat ourselves like crap. all of us treat ourselves in ways that we would not tolerate from anybody else. If somebody else treated you that way, you would not be in a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, you are stuffed in that carcass with yourself and you can't get away. So you have a choice. And that choice is, do you continue this dysfunctional, codependent, abusive relationship that you have with yourself? And those voices that are speaking in that way, this is chapter 2 of the book. Those are primal voices, and they're really loud, and they're really black and white, and they're not nuanced, and they only see a short time frame. And really, honest to goodness, that critical voice in your head is trying to help you in the only limited, dysfunctional way that it knows how. Okay? Because each one of those characters in your head can only see a limited sense. Because your identity is the story you tell yourself about yourself. And our identity arises as you are trying to impose sense on this society of mind that's going on in your head. And a lot of those voices are really primal. And what that means is they're really old, they're really concrete, they have a short time span, and they only see the world in one particular way. And so that's the only contribution they have to make to you. And they want to make sure they make that. So now, once you understand that all of your really awful negative voices are just doing a really bad job of trying to help you in the ways that it understands to do it, now you can give yourself a little grace. And you can be a little kinder to yourself. And you can teach those voices in your head carefully, practically, time after time, you're going to fail, and say, look, I understand that you are really dogging on me about this particular thing. I hear you, I understand you, I'm not clamping you down, because that works just as well like with little kids and dogs, right? You can't do it that way. You can't force it. You have to acknowledge it, and then you have to say, now, I'm going to go ahead and do this thing that you are fearful or angry or frustrated or whatever it is about. And just please hang on with me, and we'll get through to the other side, and you'll find that we can succeed. So that next time when we're faced with that circumstance, you're going to be less negative. Be kinder to yourself.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate this point as well, because this is a recent lesson that I've learned in the last couple of years too. I remember I learned this lesson from my ex-girlfriend, actually. She had this remarkable sort of positive...
No means next comes from my ex-wife, by the way.
Yeah, it's amazing how exes can teach us these things, isn't it?
Yeah.
My ex was really positive when it came to this concept of being in like a difficult situation where you feel like, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And you hit that kind of fight or flight thing, and you're like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And she was like, and this was based on experience, but she would always say, something will come along, something will happen. These are my experiences that I had, and this is what happened. And I trust in the process. She wasn't saying that she didn't get scared still and worried, but she reconciled that it would be okay. And it took me a few years to really learn that lesson properly. And that was down to emotional immaturity and stuff like that. But once I got to that point, I rely on that now. Every time something bad happens, I'm like, it's going to be fine. We've been here many times. I'm sure we'll be here many times again in the future. Calm down. Take it easy. Cool head prevails. Let's go. But you have to, as you say, reconcile with that voice. It's number one priority.
It's about disengaging those primal voices from control.
Yes.
You're not ignoring them, but you're saying, we have a more expansive world. We have a longer timeline than you can sense. Because those voices were developed long before we had developed the capacities to see a bigger picture. So they fundamentally can't see beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
And if they are engaging, what happens is your primal brain is then making the decisions, and they are engaging our frontal brains as rationalizers. So we're not making rational decisions. We've already made a pre-rational decision, and we've engaged our frontal brains to pretty it up and make it seem palatable. So you've got to disengage them from control so that you can say, okay, I acknowledge your concerns. I can see where there's some validity in it, but now my central executive is going to be making that decision and not my basal brain.
Great way to put it. Do you have any upcoming projects or some final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Gosh, I think I've probably shared more stuff than anybody cares about. But I will say,
not true.
If somebody is if somebody is interested, we have just launched. We've got a regular series of 16 different webinars that people can that are all about the managing the non-medical circumstances that follow from living with a condition that's never going to get better. So behavioral change, pain management, medical adherence, a lot of those other relationships, those kinds of things. So there's 16 of them. We do 3 of them each week, and we rotate through them. That schedule has been announced, and there's a massive discount for those things right now. We've also just launched the 3rd season of the Your Life Lived Well podcast, and the first episode that came out was about MS because it came out in March, which is MS Awareness Month. The next episode that's coming out, it'll already be out by the time this airs, but that will be coming out the next week from relative to when we're recording this, is on masculinity and chronic illness, and how do you live being a quote unquote sick man. So lots of stuff going on. Go to yourlifelivedwell.co and check it all out.
It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you and learning about your story, and just, I found it inspiring. I know my listeners will find it inspiring, but I just want to say a massive heartfelt thank you for appearing on the show and sharing it with us.
Well, thank you so much, Christian. I have had a wonderful conversation, and you do a great job with the interviews, and you're doing well.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. Honestly, I love doing this. I really do, and
it shows.
It never stops being a joy for me, I think, because when you want to just sit and listen to people's stories and engage and listen, you get so much. You really do. And for all those of you listening, like, try to listen more. And I know how that sounds. I don't want it to sound like condescending, but what I really mean is to really listen. Next time you have a conversation with parents, family, friends, whoever it is, just sit and listen to their stories and ask them about the things they're passionate about or they believe in, and just sit and listen. And you'll be amazed how much you can really gain from that. And, that's why I continue to do this show. But yeah, thank you very much, sir. And to all the listeners of the Christian Reeve Podcast, as always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.